What money? That's what my 14-year-old daughter said when I asked if the $2,000 I'd sent every month had been enough. The kitchen went silent. My parents froze mid-sip. My sister suddenly remembered to check the oven, though nothing was baking. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just watched their faces, the color draining like coffee down the sink. 9 months away, saving strangers and my own family had been bleeding my child dry. So I smiled, poured another cup, and said softly, "All right then." They thought the conversation ended there. It didn't. Not even close. When people imagine coming home from a humanitarian mission, they picture applause at the airport, flowers, maybe a quiet dinner with family. I imagined none of that, just the sound of my daughter's laughter again. 9 months in the field had stripped me of comfort but sharpened my instincts, and right now every instinct warned me something was off. The terminal at Madison felt almost surreal, filled with blinking Christmas lights and cinnamon air freshener. My mother waved, first bundled in a fur-lined coat she couldn't possibly afford on retirement savings. My father followed with a stiff smile, holding a "Welcome Home, Dr. Lisa" sign, as if it made up for a year of distance. Ava wasn't there. "She's home baking cookies," Mom said cheerfully. "She wanted to surprise you." The drive home was quiet, except for the hum of the SUV sleek new, and nothing like the old pickup they'd owned for years. A leather tag still hung from the gear shift. Mom talked about a kitchen renovation, Dad mentioned golf lessons, and my sister Brooke texted nonstop in the back seat. They asked about the mission, the surgeries, the children I'd treated overseas, but their questions sounded rehearsed, obligatory. When we pulled into their driveway, I noticed how polished the house looked. The old shutters replaced fairy lights wrapped perfectly around the porch railings. Even the front door was new dark walnut with a frosted glass panel. Dad refinished everything himself, Mom said proudly, but the faint chemical smell of fresh paint told me a contractor had done the work. Inside the house was glowing. A towering Christmas tree sparkled with gold ribbons. New furniture filled the living room, still smelling faintly of packaging foam. On the mantel sat a framed photo of Brooke and her husband at a vineyard in California. No photo of Ava, no photo of me. Then I saw her. Ava was in the kitchen, frosting cookies in her oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. She dropped the piping bag the second she saw me and ran, nearly knocking me over. "Mom!" She cried, her arms tight around my neck. I could feel how much taller she'd grown, how much thinner, too. "You're really here," she kept saying, touching my face like I might disappear. My throat tightened. "I missed you so much," I whispered. Dad cleared his throat. "Dinner's almost ready. We kept it simple, roast chicken." We sat down to eat. Ava talked nonstop about her school, her new friends, a science project she was proud of. My mother smiled too brightly. Brooke arrived halfway through, a diamond bracelet glittering on her wrist. "It's early," she said, lifting her arm. "A Christmas gift." "That's beautiful," I said. "From your husband." She hesitated. "Sort of." Her eyes darted to Mom. I tried not to notice Ava's jeans too short, frayed at the ankles, or the way her phone screen was cracked straight through the middle. Maybe she just liked her old things. When I asked about school fees, my mother waved her fork. "Everything's handled. You focus on resting, sweetheart." After dinner, Ava and I sat by the tree. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in months, the world felt steady. I didn't even care that I could still smell antiseptic from my suitcase. "Did Grandma and Grandpa take good care of you?" I asked softly. She nodded. "Yeah. They said money's been tight, but we managed." Money's been tight. The phrase echoed in my mind. I'd been sending $2,000 a month, enough to cover tuition, food, even savings. "Did you ever get the journal I mailed you?" I asked. Her face lit up. "Yes, I wrote in it every week." She pulled it from her nightstand, pages filled with her handwriting. The sight warmed me. Later, when she fell asleep beside me, I lay awake watching the blinking lights outside her window. Something gnawed at me. A new SUV, renovations, designer jewelry. Money's been tight. Maybe they used part of it for household bills, I told myself. Maybe they saved the rest. Still, unease lingered like a low-grade fever. I stepped into the hallway and caught my parents whispering in the living room. "She'll ask," my father said quietly. "Then stick to the story," my mother replied. "She's exhausted. She won't push." My pulse thudded. I'd spent 9 months holding lives together with little more than gauze and grit, and somehow it was here back home where the real wound waited. When I slipped back into bed beside Ava, I brushed a strand of hair from her face. She stirred, mumbling, "Don't leave again, okay?" My voice broke a little. "Not for a long time, sweetheart." Outside, the wind pushed against the windows, and somewhere downstairs a floorboard creaked under quiet footsteps. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down I knew. The next morning smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Ava was already in the kitchen, humming, wearing one of my old sweaters that swallowed her frame. The sight of her should have been pure joy. Instead, my attention snagged on the duct tape patch across her winter boots by the door. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, pouring coffee. Did the money I sent every month help? 2,000 should have been plenty, right? Ava froze mid-bite of toast. What money? The question hit harder than anything I'd faced overseas. I blinked, trying to process. The money I transferred to Grandma and Grandpa for you. Her brows furrowed, confusion written all over her face. They said you couldn't send money, that you were struggling with expenses where you were. The spoon in my cup clinked too loud. My parents had gone pale. My mother forced a smile. "Honey, maybe she misunderstood." Ava looked between us. "No, I didn't. You said we had to be careful with spending, that Mom was having trouble even feeding herself over there." My father cleared his throat. "Who wants hot chocolate?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Brooke appeared in the doorway, pretending to adjust her hair. "I'll make it," she said quickly, already moving toward the stove. I smiled faintly. That sounds nice. Inside, my pulse slowed, not with panic, but precision. Years in emergency medicine had taught me when the bleeding starts, stay calm and locate the source. I looked at my parents. Their faces told me everything. The rest of the morning passed in forced normalcy. My mother fussed with decorations. My father claimed he needed to shovel snow, though the driveway was clear. I helped Ava clean her room, folding shirts that were all at least a year old. "You've grown so much," I said softly. "Did Grandma ever take you shopping?" She shook her head. "They said things were tight, so I got a job at the cafe down the street. I stopped folding. A job." "You're 14. "I like working," she said quickly. "Mrs. Rivera lets me keep my tips. It helped pay for school supplies." I forced a smile. "That's responsible of you." My throat burned as I spoke. Later, while she showered, I opened my banking app. Every payment had cleared 9 transfers, 2,000 each, perfectly on schedule. $18,000 sent, received, and apparently erased. I scrolled through messages from my mother, short updates about Ava, always cheerful. "She's doing great. Don't worry about anything here. Not a single mention of money." Maybe it was a misunderstanding, I told myself. Maybe they saved it for college. But the voice in my head, the same one that had warned me before countless emergencies, said otherwise. That evening, as we decorated cookies, I watched my parents more closely. Mom's diamond earrings sparkled under the kitchen lights. Dad joked about his new toy, the SUV outside. Brooke's bracelet glinted every time she lifted her glass. Ava's cracked phone sat beside her screen, held together with tape. At one point, Ava laughed. "Grandpa's car is nicer than the ones at school drop-off." Dad coughed into his napkin. My mother's eyes darted to me. I just smiled. "You deserve nice things, Dad." He didn't meet my gaze. After everyone went to bed, I sat alone at the dining table. The house was too clean, too staged, like a showroom trying to hide something. My fingers brushed over a pile of mail. Among the envelopes, one caught my eye. "Travel agency. Final cruise payment confirmation." I stared at it for a long time. Footsteps creaked behind me. Brooke stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're still up." "I couldn't sleep," I said. "Too much on my mind." She leaned against the wall. "Don't overthink things. Mom and Dad did their best." I met her eyes. "You knew—" Her lips parted. I knew they were struggling. That's all. I said nothing. Silence stretched until she shifted uncomfortably. "Anyway, good night." She left before I could answer. I returned to my room where Ava slept peacefully, one arm draped over her pillow. Her face looked younger, vulnerable. 9 months away, saving strangers, and my own daughter had been working weekends, selling her things, believing her mother couldn't afford groceries. My chest tightened. Not from rage yet, but from grief. The kind you feel when something precious is contaminated. I remembered the final night before deployment. Ava's small voice. "Will you be safe, Mom?" And my promise. "I'll think of you every day and I'll come home." I'd kept my promise. They hadn't kept theirs. I reached for my phone, opened my contacts, and scrolled to one name, Dr. Naomi Pierce, my supervisor from the mission. She told me once, "There's a difference between staying calm and staying silent." For the first time that night, I understood exactly what she meant. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Ava was still asleep, one hand clutching her pillow, a faint smile on her lips. I brushed her hair back and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got it from here." By 6 a.m., I was sitting in my car outside Harbor Bean Cafe. The windows were fogged, the street empty except for a snowplow rumbling past. Inside, through the frosted glass, I spotted Mrs. Rivera, short, warm-faced, already arranging muffins in the display. When I stepped in, the bell chimed softly. "Dr. Hart," she said, surprised. "You're back." "I am," I said, smiling. "I wanted to thank you for letting Ava work here." Her face softened. "She's wonderful. Always early, never complains. Sometimes I had to remind her to eat her own lunch." She hesitated, lowering her voice. We worried. She looked tired. I offered to drive her home a few times, but she said her grandparents were too busy. I swallowed hard. "Thank you for taking care of her." Mrs. Rivera nodded. "She mentioned you were helping kids overseas. She was so proud. Said you were saving lives." I smiled faintly, forcing warmth into my tone. She saved mine too, in more ways than she'll ever know. When I left, snowflakes began to fall slow, deliberate, like the sky itself was pausing to think. My next stop was Madison High. The parking lot was half empty. Winter break had begun, but Ms. Patel, the guidance counselor, had agreed to meet me. Her office was filled with motivational posters and the faint scent of peppermint. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Ava's a bright girl. Her grades slipped a little this spring, but she's been improving." "Slipped?" I asked gently. Ms. Patel nodded, turning her monitor toward me. "She started working weekends in March. She told her teachers she wanted to help with expenses at home. We recommended she cut back, but she said her grandparents needed her contribution." I stared at the screen. Tardy's missed assignments, fatigue comments. "Did anyone report this without evidence of neglect? There wasn't much we could do," Ms. Patel said softly, "but we were worried." "Thank you," I said. "You've done more than you realize." As I left the school, the sun broke through the clouds, a cold, distant light, but I felt something sharper than warmth. Clarity. By noon, I was back at my parents' house. The living room smelled of pine and expensive candles. A new throw blanket still had a tag on it, "Made in Italy." I glanced toward the office door. It was ajar. Inside the room looked newly renovated, fresh paint, polished floors, a sleek new desk. I pulled open the drawers. Bills, receipts, travel brochures. One folder caught my eye, Caribbean Cruise, Departure, February 12th. I opened it. Payment receipts, upgrade options, spa packages, all fully paid. Another folder held receipts for jewelry and furniture, each item totaling hundreds, sometimes thousands. My pulse stayed steady, but my jaw clenched. Then tucked beneath the papers, a small photo of Ava, her school picture bent at the corner. I picked it up, ran my thumb along the crease, and placed it carefully in my pocket. Behind me, the door creaked. My mother stood there, arms crossed, lips tight. "You shouldn't go through people's things." "I could say the same," I replied, turning. She blinked, playing innocent. "Excuse me." "The money," I said quietly. $18,000 meant for Ava. Where is it?" Her hand twitched. "We'll use some for household expenses. Your father's medication repairs. You bought a new SUV I cut in. And a cruise." She stiffened. "We deserved something nice. We took her in, didn't we? You have no idea how hard it is raising a teenager again." "You're right," I said evenly. "I have no idea how hard it is to lie to one." Her face flushed. "Don't take that tone with me. You left. We did your job for you." I took a step closer, my voice calm but unyielding. "No, you used my absence as cover." My father appeared behind her, looking smaller than I remembered. "Lisa, we didn't mean—" "To steal?" I asked. "Or to humiliate your granddaughter." His mouth opened, then closed. My mother turned away, muttering, "We'll pay it back." I smiled faintly. "Yes, you will." I walked past them out the front door, the cold slicing my face like truth itself. Sitting in the car, I called Dr. Naomi Pierce. She answered on the second ring. "Lisa," she said gently, "you sound steady." "That scares me." "I need advice," I said. "Family matter, financial exploitation, of a minor." Then document everything she said immediately. Receipts, statements, testimonies, and Lisa, don't confront them again until you're ready. Treat it like surgery, identify, isolate, and cut cleanly. I exhaled. I already started. Good. And remember, this isn't revenge, it's recovery. That night, I didn't join dinner. I spread papers across my bed, bank transfers, Ava's school notes, receipts, screenshots of texts. I made copies organized by month and labeled each file payment, household luxury, deprivation evidence. When I was done, I placed the documents into 3 folders. One for me, one for them, one for my Aunt Helen, the only person in the family whose morality never bent. Before turning off the light, I opened Ava's journal. The December entry read, "Grandma says Mom's too busy saving the world to send money. I don't want to ask. I'll work more shifts." I stared at the words until they blurred. I thought of the countless patients I'd treated in makeshift tents, wounds cleaned, infections stopped, lives saved. And yet, my own family had been festering with rot I never saw. I closed the journal, slid it into my bag, and whispered, "Not anymore." The next morning, I transferred my savings into a new account with Ava as co-owner. Then I froze the old one, the one linked to my parents. I printed the statement of closure and tucked it into my folder like a scalpel into its sheath. As I zipped the bag, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were calm, calculating, not angry, focused. I didn't yell, I said under my breath. I did this. Christmas Eve arrived with the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Snow draped over the neighborhood like silk, muffling every sound, every breath. Inside my parents' house, the smell of cinnamon and roasting turkey couldn't disguise the tension thick enough to slice through. I spent the morning helping Ava wrap presents. She hummed quietly, focused on folding the edges just right, as if precision could make up for everything she'd lost this year. I didn't tell her what I planned. She'd been hurt enough by their lies, but tonight she'd see the truth, and she wouldn't face it alone. By evening, the house was glowing with soft golden lights. Family filled every corner, my aunts, uncles, cousins, all dressed for celebration, unaware they were walking into a reckoning. Aunt Helen arrived last, her posture regal as ever, her eyes scanning the room with that quiet intuition that missed nothing. When she hugged me, she whispered, "You've got that look your father used to have before a courtroom battle." I smiled thinly. "It's not a battle, Aunt Helen. It's surgery." Dinner began like a performance. My mother moved through the kitchen with rehearsed grace, laughing too loudly, complimenting everyone's sweaters, her diamond earrings catching the light. My father poured wine, jovial, his hand only shaking slightly. Brooke sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to notice my glances. Ava sat close to me, her hand occasionally brushing mine under the table, a small, silent tether keeping me grounded. Plates clinked, laughter filled the room, and for a fleeting moment I almost wished I could pretend. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It waits patient until you hand it a microphone. Halfway through dinner, my father raised his glass. To family, he said, his voice loud and confident, to sacrifice, to love that endures. I set my fork down. The room quieted almost imperceptibly. "That's a beautiful toast, Dad," I said softly, "but I think we should add one more word, accountability." My mother froze mid-sip. "Lisa, I just want to thank everyone for being here," I continued, my tone even polite. "It's been a long year for all of us. I've spent 9 months overseas, long shifts, no holidays, barely sleeping. But it kept me going knowing Ava was home safe, cared for." I turned slightly toward my daughter. I sent money every month to make sure of that. $2,000, 9 months, $18,000 total. The air thinned. Brooke's bracelet caught the candlelight as her hand twitched. My father shifted in his chair. My mother's smile cracked. "Yesterday," I said quietly, "I found out that Ava never saw a cent of it. Someone dropped their fork. The sound hit like a gunshot." I looked at my parents. "You told her I couldn't afford to send anything, that I was struggling to feed myself." While she worked weekends at a cafe and sold her things to pay for school supplies. "Lisa, this isn't appropriate," my mother hissed. "No," I said. "It's overdue." My voice stayed calm, almost too calm. While Ava was skipping meals to save for a graphing calculator, "You bought a new SUV, you renovated the kitchen, you booked a cruise." My father's jaw clenched. "You're exaggerating." I slid a folder from beneath my chair and placed it in the center of the table. These are the payment records, bank statements, receipts, proof. Gasps rippled around the table as pages fanned out, dates, amounts, signatures. Aunt Helen leaned forward, eyes narrowing. 18,000 every dollar, I said, transferred from my account to theirs. Ava's voice cracked the silence. They told me you couldn't send money, Mom. My mother's hand shot out. Ava, honey, that's enough. No, it's not. Ava said, tears trembling in her eyes. You said Mom was struggling. You made me feel guilty for needing anything. Brooke pushed her chair back slightly, mumbling, maybe this should wait till... Sit down, Aunt Helen said sharply. Brooke froze. My father exhaled heavily, rubbing his forehead. Fine. We took some of the money. We used it for the house for bills. You mean the spa packages and jewelry, I interrupted. He looked up, face reddening. We took care of your child, Lisa. That costs money. You can't put a price on time and effort. Actually, I said I did. $2,000 a month. You just spent it on yourselves. You don't understand, my mother began. I understand perfectly, I said. You wanted comfort. You wanted reward. And you thought I'd never come home early enough to find out. Aunt Helen turned toward my parents, disbelief in her tone. You let that child work weekends while you went shopping. My father tried to regain control. Helen, this is family business. Exactly, she said coldly. That's why I'm furious. The tension broke like a wire snapping. Voices rose. Chairs scraped. The Christmas lights flickered as if reacting to the chaos. Through it all, Ava sat rigid, tears streaking down her face, her small hands balled into fists. I reached over, resting my hand on hers. You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. Do you hear me? She nodded weakly. My mother's voice cracked. We'll pay it back. We just needed time. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second envelope, placing it beside the folder. You'll have time under agreement. She blinked. What is that, an official restitution document, I said. Prepared by my organization's legal advisor. You sign it tonight or I file formal charges for financial exploitation of a dependent minor on Monday. Gasp spread again. My father's voice thundered, You'd take your own parents to court. I looked him dead in the eye. If it protects my daughter? Yes. The house fell into silence so heavy you could hear the faint crackle of the fireplace. Then a knock at the door. Every head turned. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. My mother whispered, Who could that be? I didn't move for a moment. Then I rose, smoothed my jacket, and opened the door. On the porch stood a courier in a heavy coat, snow on his shoulders, holding a thick envelope stamped with the logo of Global Medical Relief. Delivery for Dr. Lisa Hart, he said. I took it, thanked him, and closed the door. My father's face drained of color when he saw the seal. This, I said, holding it up, contains copies of that restitution form. One for each of you and one for Aunt Helen. Helen stood, taking her copy before they could speak. I'll make sure this is handled properly, she said, her voice firm as steel. My mother collapsed into her chair, face pale. My father stared at the table, jaw tight. Ava wiped her tears, watching them, with a mix of hurt and quiet power. I trusted you, she whispered. No one answered. I gathered the folders, slid them back into my bag, and stood tall. You wanted to toast a family. Here's my version to honesty, to consequences, and to the day a 14-year-old girl learned what strength really looks like. No one lifted their glasses. Aunt Helen broke the silence. You should be ashamed, she said to my parents. You raised a daughter who saves lives, and you tried to steal from her child. My mother sobbed. My father said nothing. Ava stood and took my hand. Can we go home now? I looked down at her, her chin trembling but her back straight. Yes, baby, I whispered. We already are. As we turned toward the door, I glanced once more at the table, the half-eaten dinner, the untouched glasses, the perfect holiday facade now cracking apart. The golden light still glowed, but the warmth was gone. Behind me, Aunt Helen's voice cut through the silence. Richard? Margaret. You can fix this or lose them forever. When we stepped outside, the snow was falling harder. Ava tucked her hand into mine, and I squeezed it gently. Are they going to jail? She asked quietly. Not if they do the right thing, I said. This isn't about punishment, Ava. It's about boundaries. She nodded, her breath misting in the air. I like that word. Boundaries. I smiled. You'll need them your whole life. From inside, muffled voices rose, then fell again. The sound of paper rustling, maybe signatures, maybe denial. Either way, the truth had already landed. As we walked toward the car, the porch light flickered once like an old heartbeat. I started the engine, the headlights cutting through the falling snow. They thought silence meant surrender, I murmured. Ava looked at me. What does it mean? It means we were just getting started. The morning after Christmas was brutally quiet. No laughter, no clinking dishes, just the wind moving through the empty streets of Madison. I woke in a hotel room downtown, sunlight cutting across the floor, Ava still asleep in the next bed. She looked peaceful, finally, her body uncurled for the first time in days. I sat by the window watching the city slowly wake. For years, I'd associated home with my parents' house, that big, carefully curated museum of appearances. But now it felt like a place that no longer existed. What I had left was Ava. And the truth. That would have to be enough. By noon, we met Aunt Helen and Mr. Carter, the lawyer from my humanitarian organization, in a quiet conference room at a small local firm. My parents arrived last. Mom wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Dad clutched his coat like a shield. Neither spoke. Carter began formally but gently. We're here to finalize restitution for the funds misused while Dr. Hart was abroad. He slid documents across the table, the same ones I'd shown on Christmas Eve. The room was tense, sterile, filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scratch of pens. Mom's voice broke first. "We never meant to hurt anyone," Aunt Helen cut in sharply. "You meant to benefit yourselves. That's not the same thing." Dad signed first. His hands trembled, his signature shaky but legible. Mom followed, tears streaking her makeup. The terms were simple: $18,000 repaid over 18 months, $1,000 each month beginning immediately. Cruise canceled. Jewelry and luxury items to be sold. A written apology to Ava. Carter would supervise all payments. When it was done, I stood collecting the papers. "This isn't revenge," I said quietly. "It's accountability." Mom reached across the table, her voice cracking. "Lisa, I don't know how we got here." I met her eyes steady. "You stopped seeing people as family, Mom. You started seeing them as resources." For a moment she looked like she might argue. Then she deflated, shoulders shaking as she whispered, "I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, but it was something." Ava had been waiting outside in the lobby with a cup of cocoa. When I walked out, she looked up, searching my face. "Is it over?" "Yes," I said softly. "They'll make it right." "Can we still see them?" she asked. I thought about that for a long moment. "Someday," I said, "when we're ready. But for now, we need peace." She nodded, satisfied with that answer. In the weeks that followed, life started to rebuild itself piece by piece. Ava returned to school, her spark slowly coming back. She joined the science club again, laughed more easily, even baked cookies for Mrs. Rivera's birthday. Every month, a payment arrived right on time, proof that guilt could at least temporarily imitate redemption. I focused on my work again, but differently this time. I stopped saying yes to every mission, stopped running from the quiet. I learned that saving lives didn't always mean going halfway around the world. Sometimes it meant walking back into the mess at home and refusing to look away. Nearly a year later, Thanksgiving came around again. Aunt Helen hosted. The air smelled of roasted turkey and pine. When my parents arrived, their steps were hesitant, cautious. We greeted each other like people trying to remember a language they used to speak. Halfway through dinner, Dad raised his glass. "To lessons learned," he said. I nodded. "To boundaries kept." Ava smiled between us, not naive, not bitter, just wiser. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. I used to believe forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened, that peace required silence. But standing here now, watching Ava laugh beside Aunt Helen, hearing my father's awkward jokes, seeing my mother quietly refill water glasses instead of controlling the room, I know better. Forgiveness isn't erasure. It's choosing not to carry the wreckage any further. I never raised my voice, never broke a dish, never begged for understanding. I simply drew a line and stood behind it. That line saved my daughter, and maybe in a strange way, saved them too. 18 months later, every payment was complete. Ava's college fund was healthy again. The house that once symbolized betrayal now only existed as a reminder of where love ends and self-respect begins. If you've ever trusted someone who turned your kindness into currency, remember this: you don't need to shout to reclaim your worth. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that ends the cycle. Tell me, have you ever had to draw that line with your own family? Share your story in the comments and hit subscribe if you believe truth always finds its way home.